The Open Therapy Institute is addressing bias in mental health care. Go to our website, opentherapyinstitute.org. We have CE credit workshops about overlooked issues in the field. You can go to our workshop page and register now and become a member. And for those looking for a therapist, we match people with someone who's highly skilled and truly open. Just contact us through the contact page on the website or email us at info@opentherapyinstitute.org. Hello, I'm Leslie Elliott Boyce, and I'm speaking with Dr. Andrew Hartz of the Open Therapy Institute. And we were just having this really great conversation and talking about what we wanted to talk about. And the conversation was getting so good that we were like, okay, let's just record this.
Let me set it up with the background a little bit
Okay.
and with what you were just saying, which was really interesting.
Okay, sounds good.
We were kind of talking about this term woke right that is on social media now. And my concern about the term is that it's not a precise term, and I don't know what it means. And it's kind of broadly saying that there are parallels between a certain identity politics movement on the right and a certain identity politics on the left. But I tend to like words that give precision and clarity. And I would like to just spell out, like, I think those might be legitimate points, but you just want to say, what specifically is happening here that you're laying out? And I think the term feels so diffuse that I'm not quite clear on what it meant. And my example of another term that I feel similarly about is the term racism, which I don't use anymore. I talk about racial bias, racial aggression, racial hatred, racial stereotyping, racial discrimination. I'll talk about specific things that I think refer to specific phenomena, but the term racism I don't use anymore because it has so many different definitions from different people. And so I don't think people know what it means, including me. I don't know what it means anymore or what an audience member might think it means. So I try to use more precise language. We can still talk about all the stuff that it might refer to, but just more precisely. And so that led to you, Leslie, saying something interesting about feminism.
Yeah, I was saying it's kind of similar about feminism. That's one of the conversations that's been an ongoing dialogue on this YouTube channel for a couple of months now. I had an interview with a woman who was an ex-feminist or kind of had a sort of an anti-feminist perspective. And ever since then, we've just been having all these discussions. What even are people talking about when they say feminism? It's like what you said about racism. It feels kind of amorphous and watered down. Are you talking about women having the right to work and own property, or are you talking about abortion, or are you talking about sex work, or what are we talking about when you say feminism? And so I feel like that's it's another one of those giant kind of watery, meaningless words. And woke right is the same way. I can't quite tell what the heck that means.
What's the debate in the group about? There's some people are saying that they like the term and want to preserve it, and other people not, or what's the debate exactly?
Let me see if I can do it justice. It's been interesting to me. I've been using YouTube for 2.5 years or something like that. And having a lot of engagement from people who watch videos and conversations that I'll be having on this channel. And one of the recurring sort of, what do you want to call it? Like shit posting kind of responses that I get. Like there's some serious critiques of feminism that I see in my comments.
Yes.
And then there's a lot of these kind of slapdash, like, oh, it's all feminists. This is what you get. Feminists ruin everything. And I've wondered, what are they talking about? I'll have people calling me a feminist and things. And as far as I can tell, it's because I'm a woman. And so woman equals feminist. So I'm kind of unclear what some of these comments are about, because a lot of the conversations have been around academia, social justice. There's this equation of the social justice movement having gone too far with feminism, like saying that social justice arose from feminist theory. And if we're going to really parse that, I think that's an interesting discussion. I'm not a scholar when it comes to feminist theory or woke theory. I'm sure somebody like James Lindsay could do that in spades, but I'm not that person. But I do see them as having some distinct characteristics and also following some similar patterns. I think we've talked about sort of the life cycle of an institution, and I think a movement has a similar life cycle, where a lot of times you'll see a movement that starts about something specific, like let's call attention to this thing, or um, let's open up this redress for this grievance or this harm, whatever it might be. And then you have an awful lot of momentum behind something where even after you resolve the issue that you're there to address, you still have a kind of an institutional force that's been built, and it carries over and it continues to go too far. I think of like the gay rights movement would be one where we have gay marriage now, and it just kept plowing ahead, and it turned into this multi-headed monster that is now pride, and that is
Well,
trans.
and the big concern, I mean, for me with some of those institutions is that they target religious people
Mhm.
who sometimes just want to live their life, and
Mhm.
they have religious beliefs that don't, and it's like, just leave them alone. Like, this is their religion. Like, and it's like, I mean, if they're harassing you or attacking you or something, like, okay, that's different, but like they just want to like live their life and have their faith-based community, and it's like
Mhm.
that feels so contrary to what the ethos of the movement was, 10, 15 years ago. Um, so I think that's definitely true. And I like, I don't know if we were talking, I can't remember where, but it was about this women's health study that like temporarily got defunded and then maybe
Mhm.
refunded. I haven't really been following the story, but it was like, it was indicative to me of like one problem related to what we might broadly call feminism, where like men live 7 years less on average than women, and the focus is let's do many times more research on women's health than men's health, and it's like the goal is to expand the gap. I guess to expand the disparity in life expectancy between men and women because 7 years isn't enough. And I
Mhm.
um and I just think like if it was flipped, like if women live 7 years less than men, we'd never hear the end of it. I mean,
Mhm.
it would be a crisis of genocide, and I mean, it would just and it would be proof of how bigoted everything in society was. But men live less, and they're like, it's probably biological, and let's not even look into it.
Mhm.
And so it's like it's kind of like I think that really like and that it was how could they defund a study on women, you know? And it's like, well, we should be studying both, and the
Mhm.
disparity really is towards the men here.
Mhm.
Like so what you'd think that maybe if we're going to spend more on one group, it would be men at this point, but
Mhm.
that's not so I definitely think there are problems. I didn't mean to cut you off if there was more that you wanted. No. So well, let me say one other thing then, which is, and I think there's other like dynamics that are lumped in with what we might call feminism. I don't know that one is, I'm not sure that there's another word for this constellation of basically women's activism, other than feminism. And and so maybe that's one reason is like I even now I'm struggling for a word that's not feminism to describe this stuff. Um, I also really dislike the term feminism
Mhm.
because it's like it is womanism and it's not gender equalitarianism. If it was gender equalitarianism, I think I would have a harder time. It wouldn't, I don't think it would rub me the same way.
Mhm.
But it's not, it's womenism. And it does have this, even within the word itself, this sense of we don't care about men, we're about women.
Mhm.
And that is really manifested in how the movement operates now. I mean, there are still very profitable organizations that focus on helping getting women into college, and women are 60 per getting 60% of the BAs or what, and their goal is to expand that gap. They
Mhm.
want women to be getting more. And then there's even this kind of condescending response of men aren't doing well. Why are they
Mhm.
doing so poorly? And like it's probably because they're too macho, and why don't they do better? And meanwhile, there's all these discriminatory resources to get more scholarships and supports to women. And any little thing that ticks against women is this national crisis. And it seems like they're intent on skewing those disparities as far as possible in a way that denigrates, where men have to be, STEM is the one field where men do better, and
Mm,
it's a crisis that they have a single field where they do better, and they have to be doing worse in every field.
mm.
And that they'll use discrimination really aggressively to achieve that. And if you disagree with that, you're the bigot. I don't know. So there are like some really unhealthy dynamics within that term.
Mm.
But but I agree with you that it's not really, it does refer to like a really broad constellation of things that uh, probably encompass things that most people would support. And
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. Like some of those examples that you're giving, like the push to get more women in STEM. It's and the push to get more women in higher education when we have a female dominated process already. I mean, it's already so woman centric. I think that is awful. I mean, it just makes no sense. It makes no sense that we would be doing that. And it's not a level playing field for men and boys at that point when you've got all this like affirmative action in favor of women. I
Right.
see a need. Again, I see an argument, not a need. I won't even call it a need because I wasn't there during that time, but I see an argument for leveling that playing field if there's a time and place, and if we historically there was a time and a place when it
Yeah,
was hard
yeah,
for women to access that, then you kind of break down some of those barriers that are false social barriers to that, and you say, well, if somebody can do the work, let them do the work regardless of
yes,
whatever. But this is another case, I think these examples are another case of that movement gone too far, when the movement starts to become gratuitous and sort of pushing itself forward despite the lack of a current need for it. And then there's other things where I think it's really hard to talk about some of these things politely and socially in our culture.
sure.
Things like um, it, sexuality is one of these areas that continually comes up. It's how do you even broach these kinds of topics? Like there was this conversation that I was finding interesting on Twitter the other day between an account that was called the feminist turned housewife and a bunch of I guess she was saying some things that people were finding kind of inflammatory. So there was a lot of back and forth. Basically, what she was saying is that men should not be using porn when they're married. And the response was men who are married wouldn't be using porn if their wives were fulfilling them. And so there was this back and forth about who owes who what. And it is really, I think, and I think this is a really interesting topic. If you want to talk about that specifically and get into it, I'd be happy to, because I think it's so fascinating and there's a lot there. But it's one of those instances where what you see is that there's a complementariness to male and female dynamics and personalities and needs. They're complementary. They're not the same. They're different. And the fact that they're different, like when you talk about the study, we're going to study women's health. I don't know what the study is. I don't know if it's just general, like women's health in general, and we're going to give a whole lot of money to that, but we're going to ignore the issues that go on with men's health. And in that case, that is disturbing, according to the way that you've outlined it.
Right.
And then there's other things that might study women's health, like why do American mothers die in childbirth more than in any other developed nation? Why do we have the highest rates of maternal mortality? And why are women going through crazy hormonal imbalances at such rates that we have things like PCOS and ovarian failure, like at all-time highs? At the same time, we also have dropping sperm counts and dropping testosterone levels. So there seems like there's something going on with our endocrine systems and with what we're doing, maybe through pollution or medication, we're altering our bodies. But if you tell me that there's a lot of funding going to women's health and it's going to one specific facet of women's health, like maternity outcomes,
Well,
then that would be a different argument than a
the
general
question,
women's health study.
my concern is about a disparity in funding,
Mm-hmm.
ultimately.
But
Like,
then don't go ahead. Sorry. I don't want to interrupt you.
Like, I mean, there should be some type of, I mean, like, it would be shocking to me. And again, maybe this is going back to like the feminist movement, this diffuse, elusive feminist movement, but to be so focused on any little disparity where it's like women take time off to be mothers frequently, that's going to impact their earnings on itself. They have different career choices. They don't take any of that into account when they look at the gender wage gap.
Yeah.
They and so because that, but then when they're on this other issue, when it's like health funding or something, there's a reason why all of a sudden the disparity is okay because of A, B, C, and D. And even though men live, this much less, that doesn't matter because the women have, more complicated health. So I think it's like there's a lack of consistency, and it just seems like it's in a way that fits the term, which is that it's womenism. It's we care about women, we don't care about men. And that's borne out in how they act and how broadly this diffuse and complicated movement seems to advocate on things. And maybe that's too diffuse. Well, I want to give you a chance to respond, but I do want to go back to something you said if we don't lose it.
Okay. Do you want to go into that and I'll
Go
hold on
first.
to my thought?
You can go
Okay,
first.
okay. Yeah, it's very interesting. I've always found feminism to be too caustic, too strident, kind of unpleasant but I've also had in the back of my mind that there's a need for female specific advocacy, if you will. But the flip side is I see the need for men to also advocate for themselves. I see that sometimes the best person to speak to a problem is the person who's experiencing it. And if we, and I can't believe this sounds like I'm arguing in favor of feminism, which is weird because I don't even know what feminism is. And there's a lot of it that I would never argue for. But what I would say is like, this womanism, this like me, I'm the most important. One of the problems I think sometimes when you're describing something that's happened to you or is happening to you or a grievance, you by saying this is bad and I'm experiencing this bad thing, there's an implicit accusation that somebody's doing it. So in order to describe the thing, and this happens in couples too, in relationship dynamics, like this is hurting me, this is happening. How dare you accuse me of this? So how does one advocate for oneself without implicitly othering somebody who's not experiencing that or somebody who may be
Yeah.
until now blind to this? And it's the same for men. I mean, it's exactly the same thing. We're talking about flip sides of a coin. There's an inverse experience that's happening. If men say this is happening to men and boys, this is really shitty, then there's this outcry from the other side. How dare you say this? Women have tried so hard to this. So I think this is just one of the problems with any kind of identity-based movement, whether it's valid or not. I think you have that problem.
Yeah, it's really easy to like get into your group and dehumanize the other group and like have these escalations of aggression. Like I think that's really easy to fall into, and you can see how quickly it escalates. And it's one of the reasons why people were advocating for half a century, like we don't want to go further down identity politics. We don't want to
Mhm.
go and really universities in particular, it said you're not addressing bigotry unless you're playing identity politics. And they kind of force these conversations on society. That's happened in a way that it's taken on a life of its own. And I
Mhm.
don't think there's an easy out, but it's really easy to see them spiral. For me, and I think it'd be interesting to like break down what the barriers are, but I think there's a sense that, and this happens with other issues, where the in mainstream civil society, avenues for discourse on topics like these are not really open to men
Mhm.
or to talk about men's issues. I think like lots of people have like they're just not open, and so it puts when you don't have that avenue to have research and dialogue and advocacy at that level, and we can break down what exactly is happening there, which I think would be interesting. But when you don't have that functioning, it puts people to like, okay, we'll just escalate everything till it's horrible for everyone.
Mm,
And that's a reasonable, I mean, it's like a terrible, like socially corrosive thing, but it's actually like a very understandable response to a situation where the avenues to dialogue aren't open. And I think you really see that throughout culture, like where people are like, why is the right so nasty on this issue or this issue or this issue? It's like avenues for constructive pro-social dialogue on these in
mm,
mainstream society are really needed, or it kind of ensures that everything's going to come out sideways in these nasty, non-constructive, escalating ways. That's why we need to have like real reform in institutions where these avenues to dialogue and institutions that are talking about these issues really exist
mm,
in a constructive way, where you actually have constructive leaders who can articulate these issues in a in a helpful, nuanced way, or it kind of ensures that everything's going to come out in a chaotic way that's
mm.
destructive. I can't, I'm a little torn between, I mean, it's a little bit of both, but how much of the reason why this advocacy doesn't exist at a national level, like it's partly because the institutions
You
have
mean
tried to
advocacy for men and boys?
advocacy for men. I think other issues, where there isn't viewpoint diversity, but like this would be one.
Hmm.
Like why there isn't more organized and effective advocacy for men on a national level. And part of it is that anybody who does it is attacked as a bigot, and a lot of institutions have been captured and they explicitly don't want to allow this. And that's definitely part of it. And but part of it too is does kind of fall on the shoulders of men. I mean, in terms of like failing to build organizations and articulate concerns in a constructive way. Like if all the discourse on it is like nasty and like escalatory, it's like you're not going to get mainstream acceptance that way. Like you can actually toxify your claims more. They're
Hmm.
all linked to some like destructive aggression.
Do you know what's really interesting to me is when you're describing this sort of uh, the suppression of constructive dialogue on the cultural level,
Yeah.
I'm picturing the model of the individual that you've really clearly laid out before with regard to like Freudian theory of repression. And so you've got this repressed thing, this thing that can't be thought or said. And so it builds up and then it comes out somewhere else in this dysfunctional manner. And so I can see sort of this model of from the culture down to the individual, a clear pattern emerges. And so it's interesting when you're talking about how the dysfunction manifests culturally. It also creates a really handy metaphor for how that happens on the individual level, like within relationships, when things cannot be talked about, when somebody isn't able to share their feelings and their experiences, and they end up pent up and pent up. They end up oftentimes developing a lot of dysfunctional behaviors. And when it finally does come up, it's a big conflict. It's a big fight that it didn't need to be if it were able to be discussed openly with respect.
Yes. And I think like, and I don't think I like moving it to the individual because I think this happens in relationships. Like this happens in marriages a lot.
Hmm.
The men are unhappy with a particular dynamic. They don't either have the skills or the courage or the knowledge or whatever it is to articulate it in a constructive way.
Hmm.
And it's not just on the men. I think it's also on the women's ability to hear and dialogue with them about it too.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I think men are often not good or effective advocates for themselves. And then those feelings kind of, it's not that they go away. They're just going to come out sideways in something more destructive.
Hmm.
I'll just to like ground this. I have a like hypothesis that I've been toying around with about like what one of my big concerns is, and I don't think it's necessarily just feminists. I think it's like society writ large, but I do think it is coming mostly from women. Maybe it's coming from men a bit too, but I think it's coming mostly from women. And it's in that I think women tend to be more ambivalent about what they want from gender roles.
Mm.
And that there's this desire, like, I want to be a full-time mom and have a full-time career and have me time. And it's like there's an immaturity to it, but a lot of like the burden of like having to carry these impossible mutually exclusive demands is then kind of like shifted onto the male and like somehow figure out how she can have it all. And like I think and it's also related to what women want from men, that like women are attracted to men who have more money and more status and are more powerful. But then there's a resentment of men having more power and a desire to take away the power, even if that's emasculating. But then they're not attracted to it. And then, I think so it's like pick it, pick, at least make a claim of what you want. I think that, it's like, okay, you're attracted to men who have more power and that's gratifying. And it's like, you can still have an equitable relationship where the man is earning more or maybe has a certain type of power and that can be mutually gratifying. And like, that's okay. Like, or maybe not, but you can't like this like inability to pick it and
Mm.
then want both at the same time. And then the ambivalence is just kind of like, I think, thrust onto men who I think do have clearer preferences for what they want. I think like, I don't think it has to be an authoritarian relationship where the woman's a slave, but it's like there is like a power differential that's sexy to both people and it can still be an equitable, loving, communicative, mutually
Mhm.
supportive relationship.
Mhm.
But this inability to kind of be like, yeah, you'll probably work less. I might have a certain type of, women have lots of power that's female power that has its own way of operating, but there's a certain type of explicit male power that can be mutually beneficial to both people, mutually gratifying and attractive to both people. But there's this discomfort with just accepting this reality of like, yeah, you want to be a mom, and that's great. And that might mean that your career suffers a little bit, but
Mhm.
that's like life and that's okay, and like, but you have to pick it. And like, so I think that's a real source of frustration in on the ground, I think in actual relationships and families among men. But I think like, I just don't see men really articulating this in a constructive way. And the idea that, oh, you have to be a trad housewife or else you're a feminist or something like it's all like it's no, I don't really know that people really want one or the other. Like I don't think most guys want a slave wife. They want
Yeah.
like they don't actually want that. Maybe there's like a sexual thing or something but it's like I don't know, but it's not really like no, you want somebody who has a personality who you can talk to and
Yeah.
thoughts. But there is this like power differential that's mutually attractive to both people almost all the time. I mean, I know that's cis heteronormative, but it's
Hmm.
like the super large majority of
Yeah.
society.
Provider, protector, and
Yeah, and a
nurturer,
power
homemaker,
difference,
nurturer.
a certain type of power differential, and like even within the like traditional like, and I think it doesn't have to be super pronounced. It's just like there is a little bit of like dad's in charge energy
Hmm.
that actually, if you like look below the surface, like he's not really, but like,
Well,
but yeah,
and properly envisioned power is about responsibility. So it's about the person who's
yeah,
taking the longest view and taking the most factors into consideration and really making a well-rounded and response. It's not about arbitrary exercise of
yes.
authority. It's about responsibility. And
And
so
that's and
there's
that that's work that's
mhm.
psychologically burdensome, which is
Yes.
why it's gratifying to have the male do it because it's very burdensome. And to allow the male to
Mhm.
perform that function and value and respect and appreciate it. It's like if it's like I think that's 90+% of what men are frustrated about in these tweets that are nasty and destructive and not helpful and mean or whatever. Like 90% of it is just wanting this issue.
I will say though, This is interesting. I think that it might surprise you. Most of the families, most of the women that I know, that I have known and been close to over my life, actually explicitly want that. They want to have a husband who they can trust to be in charge of most of the overarching. Like they want him to not be standing over her, but stand at her side, but with an overview. They want a strong partner who actually has that level of care and responsibility for his family and want to look up to their husband. Most women want that. But what ends up happening so often is that if the mother is by default more responsible for things in the family, like she's the one who's paying the bills and knows when things are due. She knows when
Right.
all the things are going on with the kids. She knows what's needed. She knows where they're going to be this weekend and that weekend and the other. And she's the one who's having to always be after him to say, hey, do you remember that thing I told you about? Do you remember the thing? And and he is kind of checked out and grouchy, wants to just work and then distract himself, work and then come home and check out and go into leisure mode. Then she's feeling like she wishes she did have somebody she could look up to, and she's resentful of the amount of responsibility she's actually carrying, and that he's not aware enough of what's going on in the family to assume that role of authority and responsibility. And so I see that dynamic quite a
I'm
bit.
having a hard time following the narrative there. I guess so. Is it that the because the man's working too much, and then when he's home, he's not helping with the kids? Is that the
No,
concern?
it's in these kinds of issues, I'm trying to speak really generally, not describe any one particular family, although this is a dynamic that you see over and over again, is that in terms of community connection, what's going on in the home, the family's finances, all of these kinds of things, the the one who stays home with the kids, or even if she works also outside of the home, often ends up being more in touch with the needs of the growing family, the day-to-day life of the family. If the father or the husband focuses and sees himself as just work and then kind of resents the home life for the burden that it places on him, then he's actually not aware enough of what's going on to take a responsible role toward that family. And I see that dynamic happen quite a bit.
He would like him. He should be more involved with the child care and the chores.
Not the childcare, just knowing, caring about what's going on. Not the boots on the ground necessarily, but just the awareness. And so in families that I see where it really I can think of a couple of families in particular in our homeschool community that we have where this works really well. And you see a very loving relationship between husband and wife, where the husband is, I would say, the wife would say she looks up to her husband in all of these cases. She looks up to him, sees him as a provider, sees him as a protector, sees him as responsible, and respects and admires him. These husbands are generally very in touch with their family. The mom is probably the one who's making way more of the meals. She's doing more of the diapers, and she's the one going to the play dates and taking care of the things with the kids in the home. She's the one cleaning a lot, but he's in touch with all of that. He's
What do you
not
mean?
checked out of it.
Just what do you mean? But that's what I'm struggling with. Like he's aware, or it's like because it does sound. I can't get. It does sound like it's like because I think that there's something where it's like we want the male to like shoulder the feel responsible for providing and protecting for the family and maybe be the bigger earner and kind of shoulder that responsibility in that role and then come home and do the dishes. There is something that might not be entirely clear about that. In terms, I'm not saying like the
Hmm.
man can't ever do a chore, but like
Hmm.
or like the man can't ever play with his kids or something.
Hmm.
But it is like I don't think um it's a different I
It's
think it's
tricky, isn't it? It's really
well, I
tricky.
don't know that it is because I feel like to me, I think that what a lot of like, and what I see is
Hmm.
like really mixed messages. They like that they'll say they like, I think that women will say they want a provider and protector, but then they also want a house husband who's going to do the chores and play with the kids, but then they don't really want that. And then
Mhm.
and that there's these constant shifting mixed messages that are
Right.
actually like impossible to fulfill because they're not even internally coherent. Or it's like all the woman wants to have both and both roles, so then the man has to have both roles, but that's not really what he wants, and it might not even be what she wants. And there's a way where she's kind of dictating the family system to the male.
Mhm.
I don't know a lot of men who I don't know that I've ever known any male who has felt comfortable being like, this is what the family system like it's so dictated by the woman so often, and it's like a mess because the role differentiation is like it's constantly shifting. It's like, well, I wish you would do more
Mhm.
of this, but then no, no, but you're not really a provider, so I don't respect you. But then you're not really helping at home, so I feel alone in that. But then you're
Right.
this, and it's like I am one person and you're one person. And you kind of like there's pros and cons to being in these different constellations, but either one you're gonna lose. Like there's gonna be a problem with, oh well, I'm not helping out enough with this, or I'm not doing enough of this. And it's like if he's gonna be so I don't know. It's like I yeah.
No, I think it's really, I find it to be, honestly, I think it's a very tricky and sensitive thing. And I find it very challenging to speak in these generalizations
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
because it's very, there are patterns
What's
and
the
there are,
specific thing? What's the
well,
specific?
I would have to like go into somebody's life and give you an anecdote, and then that falls apart at the level of anecdote. So if we can talk, it's trying to balance talking about themes
Yeah.
without getting so
I have seen
specific.
couples where, the woman wants a career and wants to be with the kids, and she can't pick her career because she's heartbroken to not be with the kids.
Mhm.
She's with the kids. She feels like she's failing because she doesn't have a career. And so she doesn't want to get childcare because that means she's working and not with the kids, but she doesn't. So all of this just gets dumped on the husband
Mhm.
of
Well,
like he has
it's
to figure it out, and like and constant
mhm.
contradictory messages about what she wants that are because I think as a society like there's a reason like feminism, this diffuse term, like I don't see it, and I think in some ways the burden is a little bit on the feminists. I can't get out of using that term, but the burden is a little bit on them because they were like the old model of family was bad. We want a new model,
Mm.
and I'm like, what is it? What's the new model that
So
works?
it
And
seems to me that the problem is that both are being expected to be jack of all trades. And there is a need for that to some extent. Like people have to be broadly competent. You're not going to have
yeah,
who wants a partner who's such a specialist that they only do this one thing? That's a
yeah,
robot.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
so you need a man
Reasonable.
who even like let's envision a hypothetical family where there's a fairly traditional role divide, right? She stays home and she doesn't economically contribute except in the fact that all jobs can be commodified, but let's say she's not earning money. He does. He's the only earner. He's the provider. He goes to work. He works 8-hour shifts every single day, comes home. She's got 2 or 3 kids. She cooks, she cleans, she diapers, she does the play dates and all of that, right? So he still needs to be able to be emotionally available and playful to his children and connect and love his wife and see when she needs a break and all that stuff. And she still needs to be able to be an interesting companion and a fun person for him and able to carry a conversation about the topics that are important to him when he comes home and he's got all the thoughts in his brain. And they need to be able to sort of overlap each other in all of these ways because we have our strengths, but then we also have to be broadly competent and general. And so I think that and perhaps this is part of why we see such a drop in fertility rates and childbirth right now, because it's so, these are times when it's really hard that everything is thrown out of balance because you're not going through routine, you're going through punctuated like explosive, um, kind of chaotic experiences. Like take sex, for instance, between couples. Like you think about beginning of a relationship, there's courtship and bonding. There's this intense chemistry, this pair bonding experience where people come together and they're really all about each other in this way. And then a very, very common complaint with couples is sexual libido uh, divergence. So he's got more libido, he's more interested, and she's less interested. You hear this complaint a lot with people. A big place that goes off the rails is when she becomes pregnant, because now the hormones that were controlling both of their bodies and their relationships to themselves and each other, she's got crazy new ones, and they're all signaling to her things that don't involve getting you pregnant because you are already pregnant. And so there's this big spell. If the couple waits a while and is patient with each other and both sacrifice to each other, they can come through that. But it involves sacrifice on both parts over that period of like pregnancy and then maybe postpartum and breastfeeding. There's this hormonal thing in her body that's saying, don't get pregnant right now. So she's not in the mood. So she has to sacrifice herself to the relationship by being more receptive than she wants to be. And he has to sacrifice himself to the relationship by being less demanding than he wants to be. And so through this, they can come through. But that's just one encapsulation. That's just one example of all the ways that things go haywire, because little babies need you 24/7. And so the man comes home from work and he does have a second shift. And the woman has a 24-hour shift, even in that traditional sort of scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I think it with the issue of like the sex life's going to change when she's pregnant or something. I mean, I don't my impression, maybe I'm wrong, and I'm not saying that's not a challenge for couples or it never like I'm not at all saying that, but like in a way on the social level, I don't know that that's such a big complaint for men because it's clear. Like there's it's not like I think with some of this other stuff, there are really ever shifting demands that are sometimes like mutually exclusive
Mm-hmm.
and not clearly articulated. And there isn't really a paradigm even now.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going with like 50, 60 years of like cultural shifts around this. We've not developed a paradigm. And it does seem to me, and maybe there's a wide range of couples, so this is not, I don't want to overgeneralize, but like often that the woman is the one who picks what the structure is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and like, and often like changes her mind a lot and sends mutually contradictory things. And the guy is like trying to figure out how to respond and not like, and not wanting to get to a point of like the destructive gender fights
Mm-hmm.
that like are really easy to get to when so it's just like and I think like one thing that I think about a lot with this too is like every couple partly because we have no norms
Mm-hmm.
on this, like at all like really and so every couple has to like relitigate gender.
Yeah.
And like,
Yeah.
just what a fucking load that
That's,
is
yeah.
for each relationship to have to like relitigate. And I worry that like what really ends up happening is like the partner who's like interpersonally stronger in whatever way gets what they want.
Mm-hmm.
It's often not fair. Sometimes that's the male and sometimes that's the female. And you'll just kind of see that that's really what's happening. Like there's not
Mm-hmm.
like, social norms kind of protect the weaker partner in a way, whether they're male or female, by saying like, well, the man has to do this or the woman has to do this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's like, but they all relitigate it.
I
And
think
it's
that's a really good point that you just made about how the person who's interpersonally stronger tends to be the one who, and I think, gosh, this is such a great topic because I feel like it's so fascinating, and I feel like this is one of those things where I could advocate on either side. I could take either perspective. I want to keep turning it and looking at the different perspectives. It's really easy for me to default to advocating for the female position because that's been my life and that's something I'm really in touch with. But I could see also flipping this around and looking at it from the other angle. But your example of the stronger person, or your observation, I think that often, and when you say women will dictate the terms of the family life and the home, I
Yeah.
I think that a lot of times just by necessity and by temperamental default, the woman will end up being much more aware of the patterns of the home, especially after children. We know that women are more um, neurotic. They have more negative affect, and they can be more hyper vigilant and detail focused, and that's necessary in order to take care of young vulnerable babies. And so if there's a person who's right on the line with all the things that are going on in the patterns of this home, and another person who's kind of blindsided by that and checks out for a lot of the day because he has legit work he has to really focus on and comes back to it and doesn't know how to get his bearings, he's going to be going to her and going, okay, so what's going on? And then he might be resentful of the things that she asks from him because he's not as aware of it. So I think that goes into the interpersonal strength. It's also who's more connected to the things. So I think I'm butchering this articulation, but there's a level of awareness that I think goes into that.
Related to this theme of like awareness, like
Mhm.
it's really clear to me that like women, for the reputation they have of being the more empathic sex, have huge blind spots empathically understanding male experience.
Mm,
Like they don't understand the challenges of being a man. They don't understand there's like a brutality to it. They don't understand male desire. It's interesting. Like I talked to a friend who was in couples therapy where like their sex life like stopped
mhm,
basically. And like he's like, this is not going to work for me.
mhm,
And the female couples therapist is like, well, she's different, you're different. And it's like,
mhm,
what? No. So there is this thing about like, yeah, we're just having a hard time right now where we're not going to have sex for a year or something. And it's like, I
mhm,
think it's something where it's like, no, like your physical appearance. Like, I mean, my friend Inez Setman wrote this really provocative essay about like one of the most important things that a woman can do, especially after having kids, is like stay in shape,
mhm,
like keep your body looking good because that is actually like really important to the male. He's not gonna like probably not gonna say how important it is, and it's hugely important for like your
mhm,
marital satisfaction. And like there are things like, and I think little like status things really matter. This is an anecdote from when I worked in a high school, and there was a boy who was, I think the boy was Latino, but we had a group therapy and we were talking about gender stuff. And it was like, he was like arguing that like women should do the housework,
mhm,
the teenager. And he was like, well, and it came to like somebody who's like, well, men, not all the time. And he's like, I think he was like, white people will get a maid or something, which obviously isn't like but he was thinking New York, I guess, like
mhm,
New York, but white people who will have a maid or a nanny. And so that's how they handle the gender tension. Uh,
mhm,
and but like in the lower classes, like the woman does it. And I was like, but yeah, but sometimes you might need to do a dish. I was like kind of
mhm,
like, holding that side for a second. And immediately after the session ended,
mhm.
group session, he got in a fight with another kid and he got expelled.
Oh no.
And I just couldn't shake the idea that something about telling him that he had to do the dishes at home played a role in what led him to snap immediately
Yeah.
after the session. And like the idea that like I don't think it's work exactly. Like I think men would shovel shit. But there's something about the gender valence of some of these tasks that like is emasculating for them for one reason or another,
Mhm.
and like much more important than women realize.
Right. And I think that's really interesting that you say that because one of the things that when it comes to like who's in charge, who's in charge is whoever's most competent. That's just how it is.
Hmm.
So I think, and this might sound a little bit harsh, but if men want to be in charge at home, they just need to display greater competence. And
More chores.
not necessarily more chores, but that might mean more chores than they want to do. Doesn't necessarily mean more chores than the woman, but there might be a need to step in and be more aware, more connected, take over doing the bills, for instance, be the one who sets the agenda, even, get on board and be the one who drives the ship, so to speak. Because if the other person's driving the ship and they're doing it because they just know more about what the ship needs, but they're kind of grouchy about it and resentful about it. And then you're grouchy and resentful because they're telling you what to do and delegating to you in your own home. Then
Yeah.
maybe that power balance could be rectified by more connection and competence. And I know that'll probably really irritate some people that I said that, but
I don't know. I don't know the yeah. The gender breakdown of roles is just like I think like one thing that like we can probably agree is it's incredibly unsettled. The other really important thing to like keep in mind is like this isn't a logical puzzle. Like
mhm,
one I
right.
that's a critique that I have with like feminism. This is the secret word for today is feminism. But one of the critiques I have is that it's overly logical about sex. Like
Yeah.
this is a totally primitive, unconscious, drive-oriented thing. And it gets attached to these irrational symbols and rituals that have tremendous meaning, you know. And these little signifiers that like get people just get totally wrapped up in.
Mhm,
And so it's not really a logical thing about time here or time there. But I think it's like I think what I would say that I think what men do contribute is often underarticulated, but it's like it's really striking our inability to address this and come up with a have a sense of how things should work. I think the like social justice narrative about this is totally incompatible with who we are as human beings and really misattuned. And uh, and it's like it's so misattuned that it's provoking nastier and nastier responses. If we don't really get something, it's not just like people can't couple and people can't have kids and all of that. It's like I think real antisocial nastiness. To me, this stuff that you're seeing online is not the worst it can get.
mhm,
It can get so much worse
mhm,
and continue to escalate far, far, far more than where it is now. It's like a fire that really needs to be put out in a way that's why it's so shocking to me that like academic institutions and other institutions could just be missing half the dialectic on all these issues and
mhm.
fine with it. Like it's like you like I that is really unacceptable.
Yeah.
And like wherever we end up with this, like we'll never get there until our institutions make room for the other side of the dialectic.
Or maybe we'll never get there ever. I mean, that's one of the things that and I'm,
Yeah,
when you say that feminism tries to be too scientific about it or too, it's like
right.
rigid. Well, I think that this is a the perpetual problem of balance and that will
Yeah,
never, just like men and women are not the same, they're not even they're not even carrying equal burdens. They carry different burdens in different proportions. Like the burden of a male sex drive. This is something we hear so much about in these dialogues. Like you have no idea as a woman what this is like for men to have to come online in adolescence and deal with this feeling. And then the burden of reproduction, all of these things that we could get back into and talk about these cycles, weight gain for women postpartum and keeping in shape versus the expectation that you're always going to have a
Yeah.
slim and beautiful woman, or all the things. They're all messy. They all require sacrifice on both parts. There's a sacrifice of in the form of humility and accepting that you can be right or you can be in a relationship. A lot of times you can.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then there's so I guess
I'm not,
what I
yeah.
mean to say is, like, I think that there's this institution level conversation around these things that will never sort things out. We'll never find the final advice that makes all of it make sense
Yeah.
because it's a spiritual, messy problem. It's
Yes.
not
But
a
that's
scientific problem.
true, and it's not going to be, I don't think, like perfect solutions. And also,
Mhm.
technology and society will continue to change, and that'll
Yeah.
reshuffle back. There's a million reasons. Like, yes, but it is super out of whack right now.
Yes, it is.
These institutions, one side of the dialectic
Yeah.
is the only acceptable dialectic, only acceptable side, and anything on the other side of the dialectic is like you're risking getting canceled. It is so dysfunctional right now that it really, really warrants a massive change in how these institutions engage with these issues
Mhm.
across civil society, media, Hollywood, arts,
Mhm.
entertainment, higher
Mhm.
ed, everything, psychology. It's all of it. Like it is so dysfunctional because they've basically banned half of the dialectic and said the other half is the orthodoxy. And
Mhm.
that is certain to make things unstable and dysregulated and conflict ridden. And even if we never get to like perfection, which I agree, we
Right. I think that's really well said. And I also think that perhaps what we need to do is break free of that dialectic altogether and start talking about this in ways like we've been trying to do today that are not necessarily comfortable for anybody. Like it's weird. It's like you have to acknowledge that there's
well,
a
I
lot
would,
of strange, like the phasic nature, the cyclical nature of our
I
lives
still
that
don't feel
create the inconsistencies you're talking about.
yeah, I still
Go
don't
ahead.
hear the the male side of the dialectic, if that's what we're going to call it. Like I still, and it is online, I think often in a
Hmm.
very nasty and non-constructive way.
Hmm.
At an institutional level, in terms of like sophisticated thought, I think it's still anemic and barely exists. And and I think that one of the challenges here with this issue, but it's with
Hmm.
every issue that we talk about here, is there's an orthodoxy that's one side of the dialectic. How do we get to a more integrated, nuanced thing? I really have kind of come down with the claim that step one is outlining what the other side of the dialectic is.
So just Hegelian
And then
dialectics in general, synthesis. You seek synthesis.
but step one is outlining the missing side.
Yeah.
And it's a very dangerous place. It's a very dangerous but necessary move because then you can be like, well, we're one side of the dialectic and they're the other, and now we hate each other. And but you kind of have to go through that step to get to the synthesis somehow.
Yeah.
You can't skip that step. And I
Hmm.
think that it's a very dangerous, scary step. And part of what might be keeping us from doing this is we're afraid of that
The
intensity.
pendulum swing
Yeah,
from
and
thesis to diathesis, that you might swing too far. People worry about that. It's just like with
yes, and
the
you don't want to be,
anti-racism swings over to white supremacy or whatever it is. Yeah.
but you need some kind of outlining of that before you can get to the, and I haven't quite seen the, I've seen the nastiness, I've seen the kind of like, but I haven't really seen really sophisticated, thorough, and so people have hit on different points. I don't want to denigrate what's
Hmm.
happened out there, or Richard Reeves or other people that are working on this, and like, but there's, I think it's paltry compared to what's needed.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, I hope we can keep talking about it because I think that
Yeah,
I think it's so necessary. I think just being able to open up a dialogue about some of these things feels good because they're confusing. That we get so many cultural mixed messages and so many strong messages that just don't feel right. And then, like you talked about, that repression. So maybe opening up a channel to vent some of it out and talk about it, actually look at what it is really useful and needed.
To have good relationships and to have good families and couples, and ultimately that's what we want to do. And that's not gonna work if women are mistreated and don't have a voice and don't have, that's not gonna work that way, and it's not gonna work the other way.
Mm-mm.
And so with that, we have to like keep that in mind. But
Absolutely. Well, hopefully we can get into this some more at some point. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thanks, Andrew.
thanks.
All right.